Hello, everyone. Happy Saturday. It is January the 31st, and I wanted to take some time and spend some time with you today because a few things have happened that I think that I have a unique perspective on that I want to talk to you about. I often talk about that I have a unique background, that, I check a lot of boxes that the left would think that, I belong in certain groups because of. And because of those boxes that I check, I think that it gives me a unique perspective to be able to come and talk to you guys and to tell you how real everyday Americans feel that are Americans first and not part of demographic groups. So last night, catching up on the news. It was a busy day yesterday for us here, with primaries coming and all. Um, Work has been insanely busy. So if only the money would follow. But with that said, um, I saw this whole thing about Don Lemon, and I want to talk to you guys about that because I don't know that I've said this before, although I think as I say it now, you guys are going to go, oh, well, this makes a little bit of sense to me. But I graduated college with a degree in journalism. And I'm going to give you, and the reason why I want to talk about this, because we're going to talk about Don Lemon and what this all looks like. So I have a degree in journalism. I worked at the end of college and after I graduated for some papers up in North Jersey. And I interviewed Gerald Ford at the age of 19. So I have a fairly robust journalism resume if I ever wanted to call on it. And it's partly what made my transition into digital marketing as easy as it was, because a lot of this is writing and linguistics and how to craft a message and how to write a story. So when I've hired people here, I actually hire people with journalism backgrounds. A lot of my writing and my staff have journalism or communication backgrounds. And I think it makes sense. I think that at the moment gives me a little bit perspective, different perspective to talk about this whole Don Lemon thing, because I'm not going to talk about it from the left or the right per se. Um, I watched Megyn Kelly this morning. I started into it and I didn't watch the whole thing, not because there was something wrong with it. It's just I kind of ran out of time and needed to get on with my morning. But um, I agree and I disagree with what a lot of what she was saying. So I want to kind of throw this out. So I've been telling you guys that social media is an echo chamber and that it only repeats what it's fed, and that becomes the narrative. So to me, I've always private off the internet, I've always said, this is like I kid around and say it's the Joseph Goebbels school of journalism, right? So if you repeat a lie long enough, it becomes the truth. And the left has really embraced that. And I think they run down that. I think the right tries to do it, but they don't have the chops to do it right. I don't think that I see them. I keep trying to get them to do it right, and to do these things because this is the what I'm talking about today is I want to kind of talk in a bigger sense of all of this. This is kind of like a journalism review more than it is any on some level. Whether you like Barack Obama or you don't like Barack Obama, it makes no difference to me in this regard. Obama was a master at messaging. He knew how to use language, so he used the language of the right to promulgate the ideology of the left. And I've always thought from the beginning that Obama was brilliant. I don't agree with his policies, and I think things could have been, but everything he did, if you understand what community organizing is and how to put that all together, if you started to act that way and do that, you would understand what's going on here. Okay. So I think, and this is solely my opinion. All right. But I think that there is a master playbook in the higher echelons of the Democrat Party. I think your average rank and file Democrat does not understand this, but they know how to push those buttons because they're really good at being able to whip people up into a frenzy. And where I disagree with Megyn Kelly is I think Don Lemon got whipped up into a frenzy. But I'm going to talk about that in total in a minute. But I want you to understand where I'm coming from is that there is an entire situation out there that is fighting to undo the United States of America. And you know, when I was a kid, all right, and I think most of us Gen X people might agree with this, we always thought there was people with black helicopters that were going to come and save the United States if anything bad ever happened to it. And I would say that all the time that, nobody's ever going to allow something to happen to the United States of America. But I was always looking at that through my North Jersey prism of what that would be and what that wouldn't be. And I don't know that I understood who the good guys were and who the bad guys are in all of this. Okay. And I don't even know if right now I know that sitting here. But what I will say is that the reason Donald Trump resonates, and I'm going to preclude myself on saying this first. Let me start again and say this in a different way. I know Donald Trump says things that are hyperbolic, that are over the top. And if you understand why, is because if you set the bar out, and I'm sticking my hand in your screen, but if you set the bar way out in front of you, by the time you get where you want it to be, you end up with the result you want. So I'm going to tell you I'm going to take over Greenland, but maybe I only want a base in Greenland. I want a permanent base in Greenland. But I'm going to tell you I'm going to take over Greenland. So by the time it walks back and gets to where it is normally, that's a very common tactic. I think you guys do this in your own life. It's a basic tenet of negotiation. It's just that when you take a New Jersey slant or a New York slant in his case and put a New York pitch on it, for some of you, it insults your sensibilities. Okay. Okay. So let's just start there. The left is hell bent on destroying America the way it was founded. Okay. And if we look at how it was founded and what it was founded on, it was founded as a republic, which means it's not a direct vote by the people. So when they run around screaming democracy, 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 democracy is mob rule. I've said that to you multiple times. It's just whoever's got the most votes. So there's that. Yes, do we want to be more evolved as a people? I went to an event last night for the log cabin Republicans here in Houston. And it's interesting because in Texas in 2025, the log cabin Republicans are not allowed to participate in the party because they don't want gay people in their party. Okay. This is 2026. There's a lot of gay Republicans, whether anybody wants to know about that or not, that really is a thing. We own businesses, we go to work every day. We don't participate in this, whatever this is that goes on, and we got to be marching and waving flags. Most of us don't have time to do it because we're at work every day. Because we're building a business and we're living our lives and we're, having our families and whatever that looks like. Um, so the conversation was why in 2025 are the Republic or 2026, it's almost February. I'm still stuck in the last year. Why are the Republicans not embracing a broader tent? Okay. So Donald Trump taught everybody what a big tent looks like and to embrace that. So here in Harris County, we're having a fight between I'd rather die on principle and just be my uber right wing Tim Dunn, whatever, versus I'd make some concessions. We'll embrace 80% of the belief systems and we'll just, have a real big broad tent. Okay. Make no mistake. There's probably 65 to 70% of America lives in the middle. Okay. They want a better life for their kids. They want to get up and go to work in the morning. They don't want rioting on the streets. They don't want to worry about illegals having to pick up their kids and kidnap them. They'd like their kids to come home from school without getting shot in the head. There's a long list of things that we all agree on. Okay. That list is long. What is the definition of patriotism? What does that look like? I, I think you have to love your country. And I think a lot of both sides love their country, but it's just what version of the country do they want? And I think that the people that are trying to undo the country are whipping up the base. And that's why we have going on what we have going on. So I could talk on this probably for 2 to 3 hours, to be honest with you. And I'm not going to because I don't want you to get bored and click off. But when I look at, I got up this morning, they're rioting in LA over ICE. I am going to keep saying, I hope that somebody in the White House hears me. The way you defang this is you put it back on the Congress to pass a law. I'm all I'm doing is upholding the law, Congress people, people that are upset, people on the left. Put forth a law, pass a law to change this. They don't want to do that. And I'm continuing to say further evidence of this because we're going to just keep talking about ICE raids. There should be ICE raids. That should be a thing. Okay. Again, I'm a naturalized American citizen. I'm going to tell you something else I'm not well with. All right. I get a text the other day. I said, I'm very worried about people with naturalization certificates having their citizenship revoked. Now, I personally have been here since I have been 18 months old. I was adopted. I didn't come into the country illegally. My mother and my father did Herculean efforts to get me to pass a citizenship test at the age of 7 when I couldn't read and I still had to take the test. Um, I was naturalized in 1974. And I'm going to say I am more American than I can't really think of anybody that's more than I am. I know my Constitution. I know my laws. I know what I can do. I know what I can't do. Now, it's going to sound funny because here in a few minutes, I'm going to tell you something I didn't know. Um, but overall, I can make arguments against, for and against inside the Constitution. I can talk to you about the American Revolution. I understand the Civil War and what its causes were, and it wasn't, and how it worked, and why the government had the right to come in and take on the issue the way that it did. I understand states' rights and where that is. I understand that I think the Constitution is a bill of negative rights. And what it is it says everything that the government, it's designed to restrain the government and not restrain the people. I mean, the government is fighting mightily and has been fighting mightily since Woodrow Wilson to circumvent that. And I've long said to you that the undoing of the country is going to be the 17th Amendment. 17th Amendment made the Senate directly elected by the people. And I can argue that from and give numerous examples why the power of the Senate should never be in a directly elected body. The directly elected body was the House of Representatives. Okay, so I'm not a dummy on any of this. And I dare to say to you that I know more about the United States than a majority of the folks out there from a historical standpoint, from a legal standpoint, I love this country. And there is a bunch of people running around the Congress that now want to jeopardize my naturalization certificate because I was born in a different country, and that country still considers me to be a citizen, although I have an expired passport. I can't get that passport. I can, I guess, but there's a lot of challenges with it. Um, but I am always going to be a dual citizen, not because I'm a dual citizen and I left and went to Paris this summer. That was the first time I had left the country since 1972. So it's not like I conduct myself in any plurality. Okay. They want to pass a law that unless I can get rid of my Italian citizenship, they're going to revoke my United States citizenship. I'm upset about it. I have a friend, her daughter is from Ethiopia. She was adopted at the age of 5. What do you mean you're going to take away my citizenship unless I do? I have no control over the other side of that. I'm not causing you a problem. I pay taxes. I pay a lot of taxes because I own a business. Oh, and I pay a lot of taxes because I employ 10 people. You know, to come at me or to catch me up into something because you think you're going to go after Illa Omar is reprehensible to me. Illa Omar has enough to go after her with without getting involved whether she's a dual citizen with Somalia. And the people that are breaking United States laws, get rid of them. I don't break laws. Well, maybe traffic laws, but I don't break laws. In fact, I do everything I can not to break a law. So as a result, we're again going to go penalize the wrong people. So I'm really pretty upset about this, and we're going to have to hear about this a couple times over, I think, about this naturalization situation, because there is no earth that we should be threatening the naturalization status of people that are here minding their own business because you're mad at Somalia or Ilham Omar. Because I really think it's Ilham Omar that we're upset. She shouldn't be in the Congress, not because she is a natural born, a naturalized citizen. She doesn't belong in the Congress because she doesn't believe in the country. She is in the Congress to undermine the country. That's why she shouldn't be in the Congress. So the people that are electing her, we need to go look at that. We need to run better people against her on the Republican side that make sense and know how to speak to the people so that we get an actual real person in there. There's a few others like that too. Okay. So, but I'm pretty upset about that. So that we've got that going on too. So we've got this ICE situation. Donald Trump is enforcing the law. If you don't like the law, change the law. It's the same thing I've said about abortion. So let's come into this whole Don Lemon. Don, am I a journalist for being on YouTube? My freedom of speech is protected, but am I protected as a journalist because I run a YouTube channel? Because if I am, maybe I want to just set up, well, I really did. I have set up a use, but am I a special class of citizen now? Do I have special rights because I have a YouTube channel? That's probably not what was intended. But we're mixing up a few things. So I told you I was a journalist and I've covered stories. I covered important stories. I've been in bank robberies. I have been at the foot of a fire burning down a place, a old mill out in Bloomfield, New Jersey, that was a spot for George Washington. I won an award for that story. Um, does it give me the right to get in the middle of something? And see, here's the thing I'm going to say. So I was listening to Megyn Kelly this morning. I'm kind of trying to come full circle on this a little bit, but I was listening to Megyn Kelly this morning. Megyn Kelly was saying Don Lemon knew getting in the middle of this church thing was against the law. Now, and she gave a few examples of it, which I don't know. I always try to put things through what I've known that was against the law. I don't know. So let's talk about what Don Lemon did as to why it's against the law. This is not a, he's a journalist and he's protected. He actually probably broke the law. And I'm gonna say right now, everybody's innocent until proven guilty. That's my disclaimer. So should I not say allegedly enough? I'm saying on the front side that I feel as I'm having this conversation that I don't know if Don Lemon knew he was breaking the law. I think he thought he was covering a story. Now, if he knew he was breaking the law and covering a story, then there's a whole another set of circumstances there because you can't break the law. It's just like if she was saying, if you go up and knock on somebody's door and they won't let you in your house, you don't go barging in the house. So let's talk about what Don Lemon actually is accused of doing. Let's start there. So he got on a microphone and put himself in the middle of this church thing. And they walked into a church and started screaming about Renee Good in the middle of a church service that was going on. Some of those people thought that they were in a church shooting. Now, we live in a time that church shootings are a thing. They happen. I mean, I carry my gun to church in case there's a church shooting, I can shoot the guy. That's how I look at it. We're lucky nobody actually did get shot. All right. But what I didn't know is that there is a law that prevents a federal law, which is why this is a federal. So to say Donald Trump yet again, oh, he's a fascist, he's doing this, he's doing that. There's a federal law that says you can't go and interrupt somebody's right to worship in this country. I didn't know that. Did not know that was a thing. So when you walk into a church where the church service is going on and you start screaming and disrupt that church service and terrorize the people in that church, are you right? Are you wrong? You broke the law. Now, these people will get a trial and they'll say whether they broke the law. But what was really weird is they turned their cell phones on. It's just like the looters. Hi, I'm looting people here. I'm taking a selfie. I'm going to go put it on YouTube of me looting. Oh, what do you mean you're arresting me? You have no proof. Oh, wait, it's on your cell phone. So you can't take a selfie of you looting a store and then say, I didn't loot the store. And that's kind of what happened here is they were taking videos of themselves breaking the law, apparently. Although I didn't know, not that I'd ever do it, which is probably why I don't know it's a thing. I didn't know you can't go disturb a church service, that it was against the law to do that. So you can't go protest in the middle of a church service that's taking place. If you want to go protest in front of a church, have at it. And what they likened it to was the abortion clinics, that you couldn't force your way into the abortion clinics and change the doors. And those people were arrested. And then the guy that was starting to talk, he said he had a guy that was a January 6th guy that he too was trespassing on private property. So there's some laws that were broken or may have been broken. But to claim that Don Lemon had a right to go break up a church service because he's a journalist, I think is a big problem. Okay. A journalist, the first thing you're taught, now I don't know in 2026 if you're taught this, but the first thing I was taught is you never make yourself be part of the story. That your job is to journal. That's why it's called a journalist. So you're supposed to write down what happens. You're not supposed to be part of the story. You're not supposed to be planning part of the story. And you're not supposed to be, I would never, if somebody was going to do something illegally, I would never go with the group. Okay, you're going to do something illegal. Let me go put this down on my YouTube channel. Let me make a documentary of you doing this illegally. It's the same thing that Nancy Pelosi's kid did on January 6th. I guess she knew there was going to be January 6th somehow. Karnak, for those of you that are older that remember Johnny Carson and Karnak. Somehow she knew there was going to be a insurrection, which really I don't think was an insurrection. I don't even know what the heck it was. The cops opened the doors and let them go into the Capitol. Um, Somehow she knew that. So she had a documentary film crew doing there so she could tape the event. Don Lemon knew what was going to happen, apparently, because I watched a video of him planning with the organizers what was going to happen and where they were going. He knew he was going to a church. He knew he was going to go film, I guess, people being terrorized at a church, children being terrorized. And I don't understand the double standard, okay? But what I will say is that, do I think this has to do with the First Amendment and the freedom of the press? I think we're all confused. And again, I think it's lack of education. And I think it's intentional lack of education. So let me say that too. I'm not confused. I understand that the First Amendment, that I have a freedom of speech, that the government cannot come at me for talking bad about them. Okay, that's the freedom of speech. It doesn't give me the right to slander somebody. It doesn't give me the right to yell fire in a theater, which is the common explanation of that. I understand that we have freedom of the press, which is that the government cannot suppress the written word. I also understand that as a reporter, I have to not make myself part of the story and that I really shouldn't be participating in illegal acts. And when I do, if I get caught, the fact that I have a press pass doesn't exonerate me from that. In Don Lemon's case, I have to wonder because I don't know. He was asking for YouTube subscribers as he was doing this. And the weird thing is that we seem to live in this world that we do things for clicks. We do things for notoriety. We do things to get people's attention. Now, you could say, well, Beth, you're here, you're talking to us, you're doing this. So let me just say, I am doing this, and I'm doing this. The executive producer came to me, and I don't know that I explained this, but my executive producer came to me, and she said to me, I think you would do a really good job at this because you are able to take an issue and explain it in a way where everybody, regardless of your political persuasion, understands what you're talking about because you make sense. It's like I said, we're making sense common again. I think that's going to be my friend Miriam came up with that, and I think that that's what we're going to go with, making sense common again. Because everybody knows you can't go charge into an illegal situation. I just found out you can't charge into the middle of a church service. That was new. It's not something I would ever do. So I guess the fact that you have to tell me that I'm not allowed to do that, I appreciate it, but it's not something I'd ever do. I mean, people go there to be intimate with whoever their God is. They go there to honor and to whether, and if it was a Muslim church, would we have done that? No, you went to a Christian church and Christians are under attack. And you know what's funny? We say we have freedom, there's separation of church and state. No, there's not. What it is that we have freedom from religion, meaning that the government is not allowed to say that Christianity or Catholicism or Judaism is the official religion of the United States of America. But that doesn't mean that you have the freedom to do whatever the heck you want. All right. Especially if you do it in the name of religion. You can't go shoot people in the name of religion. You can't go film people in the name of journalism. All right. So I think we throw these concepts around because we really don't know what the heck we're talking about. I mean, to me, I understand my First Amendment right as a journalist that I can publish what I want and the government cannot suppress that. Okay. If I say something erroneous about somebody, they have every right to sue me, and that doesn't, just because I'm a journalist, it doesn't protect me. If I protect my sources and I am subpoenaed by a court of law, they can hold me in contempt and put me in jail until I turn those sources over. These are real things. Um, these are things that happen. So I look at all of this, and my thought process on it is that Don Lemon, in my opinion, went to an event that he thought was going to get him subscribers for his YouTube channel. And by the way, if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe. Um, he thought he was going to go and get subscribers, and it was a publicity stunt. And now he's claiming he's a journalist, but being a journalist doesn't make you above the law. And when you break federal law, they have every right to indict you. Furthermore, to hear Megyn Kelly tell it, the guy that they went to a magistrate, and again, I'm not a lawyer. I mean, if you want to ask me about business law, I'm actually pretty good at that. But like some of this, like criminal law and how that works, I'm not completely clear on it. But they said they went to a magistrate, and the magistrate is married to somebody that works for Keith Ellison. Now, we just talked about Keith Ellison, yes, last week, because he's like the Attorney General of Minnesota. And anybody who knows anything about Keith Ellison is he's a radical Muslim. I mean, he's a Democrat and he's a Muslim and he's a, he has the attributes, in my opinion, of being somewhat extreme. And even he, is kind of moderating a little bit on this. Anyway, the judge that they went to, so I'm going to say this. I personally cannot imagine having a relationship with somebody in my house that is the polar opposite of who I am. To me, I don't know how James Carville and Mary Matlin do it. I don't know. Because there's such a fundamental difference, at least on screen, that you would have to I couldn't do with that. If like James Carville lives in my house, I would be divorced in a week. So I don't, I have to say that if the lady that you're married to works for Keith Ellison and you're the magistrate, I have to think that you agree with these these leftist policies. The problem with the judiciary in this country at the moment is that we, rank and file citizens, think that judges are impartial. And what's happened is judges are not impartial. Judges are using their benches to further push their political agendas. So much so that here in Texas, they had to rein in the judiciary and say, look, if they chop a little kid's head off, you can't let them out on a reconnaissance bond. I mean, we actually had to tell judges that you can't let the illegal alien out on a reconnaissance bond after he raped and murdered a little girl. I don't know why we have to say that. Again, common sense. If you murder somebody, I don't care if you're pink, purple, illegal, what you are, you belong in jail. You belong due process, but you don't belong being let out on your own reconnaissance when you can just go walk back over to Mexico and then we can't get you. So it's an interesting set of circumstances that we have here because you hear as a regular American drive-by, well, they tried to go with a judge with it and the judge wouldn't do it. So what did they do? They went to a grand jury. Now, they didn't go to a grand jury in Texas or Alabama or Mississippi. They went to a grand jury in Minnesota and they said Don Lemon should be indicted. So they went and did that. Okay. So it's not like we went to a state that had extreme that was more conservative and went and tried to get Don Lemon arrested. He was done in Minnesota with the people from Minnesota. So they're their own type of people. Here's the thing. It is highly disrespectful to go do that. That's not protesting. That's trampling somebody else's rights. And you're upset because you feel that illegal rights are being trampled or your rights are being trampled. I'm not quite sure whose rights they think are being trampled at the moment, but it's okay for you to do that. The hypocrisy of all of this is just staggering to me. So I look at all of this and I say, I might have not known that there was a Faith Act or I don't know. I think they were saying Faith Act or a Church Act or whatever, and then something to do with the Ku Klux Klan that you couldn't do these things. Okay. There's acts against this. Okay, great. Oh, and by the way, I don't have a whole show of researchers, so whatever I research is I have to do it myself. Maybe someday I can have somebody, but it's me and the executive producer, and that's about it. So I look at all of this and I say, this is what's wrong with journalism. This is what I'm putting my podcast together for to rail against because you're taking your ideology and you're not remaining objective. You thought it was okay to cover somebody running into a church and disrupting their worship services, something very personal, and you thought that was okay to do that. And you're doing it under the guise of journalism, but your brand of journalism is a YouTube channel that you need subscribers for. I, I, I will say, I have said, and I'll say again, the second you monetized, the second you monetized news is the second it stopped being objective. What I will say is right now, I am not monetized. Nobody pays me to do this. And if I ever do get money to do this and people want to sponsor it, that's fine. But I'm going to give you fair warning that I'm not for sale. I don't have a price point. And I've proved that a couple times over. There's been a few things that have come up in my life that I could have been on easy street if I had taken a different path. But I thought that doing the right thing was much more important, and that the people that were put in my path to do the right thing for were much more important than me being given a 7-figure job so that I had to stand down and walk away. I just, it's integrity. And it's something that I think we're lacking. And I try to do the right thing at all costs, always, because I think it comes back to you tenfold. When you do the right thing, I mean, I guess some people that do the wrong thing can say this, well, look, I'm living a great life. I did the wrong thing and I'm living a great life. They have more money, probably, than I do. But that's debatable whether they're living a better life or not. I don't know in their own skin where people are on something like that. So when I look at this Don Lemon situation, Don Lemon did what he did. And I think it's because it fell within his ideology. And he thought he was going to sensationalize something and get YouTube's clicks for it. But where I disagree with Megyn Kelly is I don't know that he thought anything different than what he said, which is I'm covered under the First Amendment because he has the education and background of this corrupt education system that's been in place since the 1960s. Every one of us that now I got to disclaim myself as I went to private school. So as a result, I didn't come through that, but I can see the fingerprints even on people. I'm given documents and I can see very well that their bias are baked into the documents. But it's not because if I went to them and I would say, are you on the left or the right? They tell me they were on the right. But the way they all framed it, they framed it as the left is, the documents are framed as the left is the benchmark and we're below the benchmark. That's just a classic liberal education that you got in a public school system somewhere in Washington, outside in Washington, D.C. I mean, we fight it here. Um, so you end up with this replicating problem. So I don't believe that Don Lemon knew this was illegal. I think he thought he was chasing the click, covering the story, figured he was a journalist and he could go do whatever the heck he wants because somehow being a journalist allows you to do that. And that's not true. Common sense would dictate that, but I think common sense is out the window. You get so steeped in your ideology, you don't know how to move forward. And I think that's what we're looking at here. So the news is now biased, not because they have a cognizant thought of, well, this is what I'm doing, so I'm going to go out and I'm going to push my agenda and I can do that. I think some of them do, but I think intrinsically they don't know how to be in the middle. It's one thing I'm trying to do with this show too is I really am trying to keep it of what is balls and strikes and not so much what is ideology. And I think I'm doing a good job, and I'll tell you why, because the streams for my social media, my own walls, if you will, they are giving me posts for Democrats and Republicans. They don't know where I am. They don't know what state I'm in. I've got them all confused. And the reason I have them confused is because I'm just talking about common sense. Common sense dictates you don't let 20 million meat people into your country. There's no other country on earth that has done that, nor has ever done that. And if you think that it's okay to do that, see London, because London's falling. Whether anybody realizes that or not, London's fallen, and Paris is next. All right. Because there's no organized country behind that, people don't understand that either. That's a whole nother thing. So we're so hyper worried about who we offend, and we're not defending ourselves. So I could go on with this for a while. I'm not going to. I think it's a good stopping spot. But understand freedom of religion is really freedom from religion, meaning they can't make a state sponsored religion. Doesn't mean you have to have separation as church and state. That went in a garbage can and was not part of the Constitution. Freedom of press doesn't mean freedom from law. It means that the government cannot suppress the press. And furthermore, press, you had a really important job to do that you messed up. Your job was to hold the government accountable. That doesn't mean I'm going to allow 20 million in under Joe Biden and look the other way because I like Joe Biden. And then I'm going to beat up on Donald Trump because he's now anything he does something wrong. Your job is to hold both sides accountable. Biden should have been accountable. He was an addled old man that had dementia and everybody knew it. And you guys are all coming out now going, we just noticed this. Like hell, you didn't just notice it. All right. So you had a job to do and you have utilized your job. You are the biggest bunch of um, propagandists there are ever in the history of propaganda. You would do as much as you all want to call everybody Nazis, you would do great. Goebbels would love you, every one of you, because you repeat the lies long enough, everybody believes them. What's really sad is even you believe them. Most Americans understand what's going on, but they don't know how to articulate it. Most Americans still have common sense, but I worry about these younger generations because I'm starting to see that this classic liberal education has permeated even their everyday things, that it's not an ideology, it has become how they frame things and how they explain things, and um, it's not a good place to be. Critical thinking is gone. And as we age and our generation, I'm going to say Gen X, which is me, and as Gen X starts to age out of all of this, the millennials are coming in behind it. They're sort of scary. We need values. We need to understand to put our families first. We need to understand that we don't want lawbreakers around us. And that if I don't want lawbreakers around me, it's not okay to let people into the country. It's not. There was no circumstance to let those people in the country. It was not a thing. And this behavior of riots and burning and this and that, this is all because of the midterms, folks. They think that they won the 2020 election because they of the summer of love with what's his face that got that guy. Well, I can't. What the heck was his name? I can't even think. I don't even want to know his name. I can see his face. Can't think of his name at the moment. It's probably a good thing. All right. But we had the whole summer of love of 2020, and they think that won them an election. So now we're just going to do this with ICE because it's all about power. It's not about you. It's not about your family. It really isn't even about the illegal aliens. It's about how am I going to create so much commotion that I'm going to obfuscate everything and make people not like Donald Trump. A majority of the country voted to get rid of the illegals. You are in a very small percentage if you think that anybody wants them to stay. And this whole idea that ICE is doing things to people and raids and this and that, you guys are going to start a civil war. Maybe we already have one. I suppose we already have one. But this is out of hand, it's out of control, and it could easily be fixed by legislation. And Don Lemon, if you think you want to go fix something, that's what you should be. You should be putting a microphone in Elizabeth Warren's face and saying, "Excuse me, Elizabeth Warren, why have you not introduced legislation to legalize these folks so we can stop this?" That's how you stop it. But they don't want to stop it. They do not want to stop it. So I'm going to say enjoy the rest of your Saturday. Those of us in South Texas, we're going to be cold again. Drip your taps. That's your free weather advice for the day. Um, and we're going to be back next week and we'll figure out what the next topic is. I may start talking about elections. Again, I have a list of everything Steve Toth voted against, um, including flood warning systems that would have saved all those kids at Camp Hope. So as he keeps wanting to throw rocks at Dan Crenshaw, um, yeah, you didn't allow warning systems that would have saved those little girls' lives. So when you have blood on your own hands, you probably need to stand down and be quiet. Anyway, in other news, I think my sister's sitting at a table with him tonight at a gala, so this ought to be good. We'll see how it goes. Anyway, have a good Saturday, everybody. Thanks. Bye bye.